In the intro, hello! Welcome to Composer Talk. This is week 10, and I believe my cohort Jacob, you might be able to see him maybe over here. The video quality is less than what it normally is because he's at his parents' house and I think they live out in the boonies or something, who knows. But anyways, this is Zach Daniels, Jacob Frost, and we are here to talk about some composery stuff.
Yes, you can see me on the
Yes.
video, but there's a lot of lag. There's a great deal of lag.
It's also just a
So
frame rate lag. Like, dude, your frames. It looks like I'm basically like holding my eyes really squinted and blinking them a lot. It's
well,
brutal.
is my audio at least in? I hope my audio is in sync.
Your audio
Um,
is not in sync with the video, but your audio is at least manageable. If the video gets too bad, I'm just gonna crop you over with the picture I used last week. It was great.
okay,
Yeah, that's
okay.
gonna be the worst case
Well,
scenario.
right. Um, well, hello. I'm here as well. We're communicating long distance this week as last week, so please forgive any. We ask you to forgive any technical difficulties we may have.
And there
But
are many. Good. All right. Well, let's just go ahead and dive straight into some news items. Despite the fact that it's a holiday week, we've actually got some good news going on. Want to start out talking about the Music
um,
Modernization Act?
so the first thing, this is actually a kind of a big thing. Last week, uh, we talked about some stuff going on in the industry and with regard to a court decision that ASCAP was hailing as an important victory for songwriters in getting fairer compensation. This week we have another big news item in copyright law. The Music Modernization Act has been, I believe it's in the House of Representatives, is a bipartisan effort to modernize the copyright, well, particularly the royalty system for songwriters and for composers. So ASCAP put out a rather good article that summarizes this act. I'm not going to go into all the details as that would get into boring legalese, but basically what it does is the main thing it does is create. It's essentially the government is authorizing the creation of a kind of a blanket licensing system that will hopefully do something to consolidate the myriads of competing licensing systems we have right now that make it difficult for songwriters and composers to get proper compensation for the use of their compositions. Um, ASCAP has come out in favor of this. It and several other performing arts organizations are hailing it as an important step in the right direction for copyright law. Some organizations are not as happy about it, however. The Songwriters Guild of America put out a statement basically saying that this is kind of a step in the right direction, but we can't really sanction it until there are changes made. Their concern in particular is that the board that the government has authorized to oversee the creation of this licensing system would not have equal representation of creators on it. So songwriters and composers and performers, it would be the majority of the people on the board, this collective, uh, under the current legislation, would be copyright administrators. So yes, and kind of an important note in copyright law for music. Uh, Perhaps not perfect at this moment, but a lot of people are really getting behind this. Um, yep.
Yeah. Well, that's some awesome stuff. I'm pretty big into this stuff, and I think it's really important to kind of unify the front, so to say. And this really does a lot for that. Everything from this to because SCI did something recently too with trying to get people to speak out and join, uh, kind of against some stuff that Capitol Hill here in the U.S. is doing. But yeah, I'm excited about this. I'm curious what the impacts will be because yes, this is a good step, but will it actually set us on the right path? That's the real question.
Well, and I mean, as a creator, as much as I realize our licensing system is messed up, by the way, it's not just licensing that this bill does. There are some changes to how how court cases with ASCAP BMI are handled legally that look to be a good step. That will help things to be resolved more fairly. With the licensing thing, I tend to be suspicious of any, suffice it to say, government
Oh boy.
And I think, I mean, as a creator, as somebody who likes to be independent, it does kind of concern me whenever the government tries to step in and try to impose a standard on everyone. However, this is something that the free market up to this point has not proved capable of solving, at least the market we have right now. I mean, it's the kind of thing where I think you can justify somebody stepping in and being able to make or at least put into motion something that'll be a little more standard for determining how we get paid.
Right.
But but as some songwriters guild in particular have brought up, there's still issues with it. So we'll keep you updated on how this plays out, in the next several months. The other encouraging thing to me about this is it's a bipartisan effort. So we have people reaching across the aisle to try to get something done, which is nice to see in our times of political polarization.
Right.
So,
and for those that don't want to go and find the website, I'm currently scrolling over Jacob's face just due to no other place to put it with inputs. I'm scrolling through the entire bill, so you can pause the video. You can, read it piece by piece if you want to hear, instead of having to go through the website. Because, I mean, not everybody's subscribed to ASCAP, and I'm not going to give you guys the URL just for protect us. Yeah, it's a good read. If you can find the bill, you need to read it. You need to know what's going on. Definitely important. Talk about next, Jacob.
Well, you wanted to bring up
Oh, that's right. I wanted to bring up Alma Dusher, a 12-year-old composer prodigy. Basically, this 12-year-old girl, she composed an opera, and well, I guess she was 11 technically when she wrote it. She's 12 now, and she just kind of swept people away with it. It's of Cinderella, so I mean, it's a story that we all know, and it premiered just a few weeks ago, wasn't it? And I mean, it's definitely a good effort. I mean, I wasn't composing like that whenever I was 12. I mean, were you?
I should play the first song I ever wrote when I was 12 on here sometime.
No. All right, veto.
I encourage those who are just getting started that it does get better after after a while.
Oh, it definitely gets better. That much we know.
I wrote my first song when I was 12 years old. When I had first gotten my first guitar, and it was called Party. It was about partying, which I was 12 years old. I had no idea what partying was all about. But
yeah, first thing I wrote was I was trying to be cool. It was called Manifestos. Not after the Communist Manifesto, but just like, this is what I want to say, and I'm putting it in a suite type thing. I was actually going more meta with it. But yeah, it's a similarly voiced effort.
You could come up with for your first piece. Yes.
I couldn't think of anything else, and then someone said, "Oh, this is like your manifesto, then your first opus." And I'm like, "I guess I'll call it Manifesto."
Well,
I was a silly freshman in high school. I didn't know you.
I think I haven't listened to the whole opera. I listened to it. I just actually listened to an excerpt before we started today, and I mean, yeah, it's hard to come out and evaluate the work of a prodigy like this. I mean, it's derivative of composers that have come before, but of course it is. She's 12, and she's just starting to discover her voice.
Well,
and
I mean, this is technically a quick news item, but I kind of just want to ask you, just because, I mean, the question's there, it's dangling in front of me, I might as well ask, but what do you what do you think defines her being a prodigy over, you or I, as an example?
Well, prodigy, I mean, it's a relative term, of course.
Right?
I mean, and and I think it's kind of hard to answer the question. I mean, obviously, as somebody who's written an opera at 12, that is unusual. That is unusually accomplished for a 12-year-old. And I mean, from what I heard, I mean, it's a completely, I mean, plausibly well crafted opera. I mean, in the style of the late classical and early romantic composers. Um, and I mean, yeah, I mean, yeah, prodigy is a funny word. I mean, it's not like we have a set definition for who is a prodigy and who is not. I mean, I guess I don't really know that I understand your question. I mean, I'd classify her as prodigy as opposed to me at 12 because I hadn't done anything when I was 12. Like
Well, and that's fair, but like let's just here, let me contextualize it more then. I mean, let's just because keep in mind, I was writing unusually too at the age that I started because at 14 I was writing my first symphony just because I
right.
felt like it. And I was having my first orchestra premiere whenever I was 15. I
Hmm.
mean, what makes this girl prodigy more than someone in that situation? I mean, I'm not saying me in particular. I'm just using that because it's a situation I'm familiar with. Like, who what executive committee sat there and decided, oh, this is a prodigy because she did this,
Well, I mean, it's the media ultimate. I mean,
right?
I mean, there are actually a lot of, from what I've read, there's a lot of child prodigies out there, like more than you would think. And for of course, I haven't heard of the music you wrote when you were 14. So I don't know how it compares to Alma Deutscher. I think it's Deutscher. Well, that's how you'd
I think it's
pronounce it.
Sorcerer too. Yeah, I
Um,
butchered the name. I'm
I,
sorry.
I'm not sure if the name has been anglicized or not, but Deutscher would be how you pronounce it in German. Um, and like to me, prodigy kind of tends to imply, if you talk about a child prodigy, that it tends to imply that at a prepubescent age, you have achieved a level of proficiency in the craft that is very unusual, which I don't think. I mean, yes, you were. I haven't heard a lot of your early stuff, but you were writing at a very advanced level as a teenager. Um,
Right. And like
which
so I guess
prodigy.
the question is
Um,
this. If the right, let's just say, because I mean, just because he's a news anchor from my area and I know the name, let's just say Brandon Beck from KY3. You've seen him because you lived in Spring.
right.
Like, let's just say he happened to be at my high school for some reason, as his nephew or something played in the orchestra that night.
Hmm.
I mean, would I like? How would that have changed? I mean, if some random news guy just came in and said, "Oh, this guy's obviously a prodigy. He wrote something whenever he was young." I mean, yeah, I personally don't think. Personally, for me, I think prodigy is before you turn 10 and you write a major work. That's my mental thing for that, and maybe it's just because I'm comparing it to prodigies of the past and all that. But to me, it's just like I guess it's maybe at like a reading or they happen to know somebody or like there was a favor of like, oh, I like it because I haven't done too much digging on how this piece even got heard, let alone looked at. um
Hmm.
but I strongly suspect it was something like, oh, I'm a little girl, I've written some music, so mommy and daddy call X symphony orchestra, had to have the conductor look, because nobody knows how to get a hold of conductors other than just to call the symphony hall and ask, hey, can I talk to your conductor next time he's around? Most of the time
Right.
they'll say yes, just for publicity reasons. And I mean, they probably just sat there, and to be nice, like if I were to send the conductor something like that, he'd just be like, "Oh, I ain't looking at it." But to please the little girl, he probably sat there and like read it and was like, "I have a friend that likes this. This is so good." And I don't know, it's one of those things that's like, I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad work. I think it's a quite good work, but is it being oversold? I mean, and I'm not trying to downplay it. But...
I think, I mean, ultimately, when you talk about child prodigies, I mean, the being discovered is something that's dependent on social position and connections. I mean, like you're saying, there are probably many other. I mean, it's not like everybody can write like this when they're 12. But
no, no, not everybody by any means.
yeah,
Like she's in the upper percentile.
Right, probably more than you would think. Child prodigies in the area of music and others, and whether you get discovered is not necessarily a function of talent, but rather a function of the connections you have. And I think, I mean, people get obsessed with child prodigies. And I mean personally, I think it's great that Alma Deutscher is writing music, that she's writing at a very high level at a young age, and that she has the opportunity to hear her music performed. However, a lot of educators have advised caution when dealing with prodigies like this, because a lot of child prodigies. I mean, if you look at the statistics, most of them don't end up becoming top quality workers or artists in their field. A lot of them get burnt out, um, and I think a lot of it has to do with the media attention, pressure from parents in many cases, and I have no idea what this girl's situation is. Hopefully, her parents don't pressure her beyond what she wants to do and allow her to pursue what she likes. But in a lot of cases, that's what happens. I've been reading this. I just finished reading a book by David Foster Wallace called Infinite Jest, and much of the work centers around a tennis academy for middle and high school students. It's a kind of like this classical private school, but it has a dual academic and athletic focus. And one of the main themes in the work is how recognition and fame impacts these kids. And in the story, some of the people in charge of this academy have to explain to reporters who come around snooping around that we basically shelter our students from all media attention, because once they get that media attention, they stop seeing themselves as I guess you'd say craftsmen and practitioners of their art, and they see themselves as celebrities or objects of attention. That can actually harm your dedication to your art or to whatever craft you may pursue. So
Right.
hopefully that doesn't happen to young Alma.
Well, I would hope not either. I mean, I never wish ill harm on people like that. It's just, I guess I always look at these people with caution, and it's because, like you said, the prodigy syndrome. Syndrome, really. There we go. I'm coining that. Prodigy syndrome. Prodigy syndrome. I guess also I'm looking at from her perspective, because I mean, I've seen other people be hailed as a prodigy on local and regional levels that really aren't prodigies at all. Like, I've literally met someone who was hailed as a prodigy that didn't even write a piece. All they did was arrange something. And all they did was flip a couple parts around. Like,
Right.
So I guess the issue is, and now this particular kid is now finding out, oh man, I'm over here in Boston. I can't do anything. I don't actually know what I'm doing. And so basically, I'm fast forwarding Alma for 7 years to where she's in this other kid's perspective this other kid's shoes that he's currently in, where he's realizing, oh god, I have a no talent hack. And I don't think she's gonna run into that, but is she gonna run into a situation where it's like, oh, I'm really not as good as I thought I was, or as people made me out to be? And that can be really damaging, particularly like you enter a school your first year and you just get schooled by someone. I mean, I accidentally schooled somebody whenever I entered jury. And that kid he's currently working as a chef because he ran away from music. Like, and there's another person that ran away from music in a similar situation I know of. I mean, it's really easy to get scared off.
Everyone has to have their little oh crap moments throughout their career where they realize oh, I've gotten all pumped up, my gotten a big head, and somebody takes him down a notch. And ultimately we're all going to have those moments, but how we react to them depends on how we're prepared for that. If we've been taught humility, and we've been taught not to fear failure, but to move past it. And ultimately, I mean, a lot of it kind of comes down to the parents.
Right.
And because I don't know Alma Deutscher's parents, I don't know what situation she's in. Unfortunately, for a lot of child prodigies, the parental situation really isn't that great. In the sense that I mean, a few years ago, you had all the controversy about quote unquote tiger moms, which, whether or not you use that term has a little bit of a racially charged connotation. But in any case, parents who push their children to a specific goal, and don't necessarily, and which on causes can cause the kids can get a big head, because of the hype surrounding them, and can also uh, just burn them out because they never felt like they had a choice in what they did.
Right.
Ultimately, it's kind of there's a fine line between proper recognition for a young person's talent, and improper hype,
Right.
that puffs them up, and it's a fine line to walk. So,
Well,
um,
in the end, I mean, Prodigy Syndrome aside, I just want to say, congratulations, Alma. I mean, it is a perfectly good piece. I enjoyed parts of it. I think it's a good thing. But I just, if you find this by surfing YouTube, wherever, Alma, I have one piece of advice, and that is, do not listen to other people too much. Use them just enough to kind of push you forward, but don't let them steer your craft, because then you will end up burnt out. Because if you let other people take the driver's seat, then you're just there for the ride, and it's no fun. It's a lot more fun doing the ride yourself. Anyways, moving on from Alma.
never assume that you have it all figured out.
Yes, there you
Always
go.
be open. Always be open. Yes.
Yeah. So moving on past Alma, actually, I'm gonna go ahead and chat now about the recorded music bit, just to kind of polarize that a bit. Um, so the recorded music industry, we mentioned this last week, and we're gonna mention this again because now it's kind of been reinforced by other outlets. The record industry is up 5.9%, and that isn't even accounting for, I mean, the other thing that's on the rise, unfortunately, is digital piracy. And the thing that I look at here is, if it's that up that much with the rise of digital piracy, that is actually really incredible. Because I actually wouldn't have been shocked to see it down because of all the digital piracy that happens. But it's up in spite of that, and that gives me more and more hope for things like, I mean, if, whenever we find a good way to deal with digital piracy and a really good way to filter against it and to prevent it, that means that those sales are only going to go further up, potentially. So this actually gives me a lot of hope because, we've been in a dark time, I guess, for about 5-6 years where it's been like, oh, recorded music, it's dying, all that. There's no point. People just pirate, da da da. Which honestly, I'm part of that boat. Part of me thinks, why do it if people are just gonna steal it? It's, but this gives me a lot of hope. And the article we have linked today is from IT Pro Portal, and I mean, it's just incredible. I mean, amongst all these rising technologies, you've got VR and AI have taken leaps and bounds this year. You've got, AMD out with the Ryzen, which has pushed computing to the next level for, affordability wise and all that. So there's all these different options, but recorded music, like the physical media of buying a CD or going onto iTunes and downloading an album or an individual song, that is still rising, even with the rise of streaming, online piracy, online radio, all that stuff. It's still up, and that is really incredible. Uh,
Well,
so I think it's awesome.
a word of all that being said, the article actually says that streaming is actually counted in these figures.
It
As
is.
recorded. So and streaming is actually the primary driver, according to this article on IT Pro Portal.
Right, but however, the thing I should have been a little more specific. The streaming part, what I was referring to, in spite of streaming, is there are a lot of people that for TV shows or bands or mixtapes, whatever, favorite movies,
Mm.
they will create bogus YouTube accounts and they will just sit there and illegally stream something for weeks and weeks until YouTube can catch up with them to shut them down. Whether it be, oh, I love AC/DC, I want the whole world to just sit there and listen to AC/DC all the time, so I'm going to illegally stream all the AC/DC songs for until I get stopped by YouTube. I mean,
Right.
that is a thing, and that's the stuff that doesn't count into this, and that's stuff that actually, like, if you see it scrolling through YouTube and all that, I mean, got several hundred views every time, and you multiply that by there's thousands upon thousands of them. I mean, that's people that could and very much should be paying to either buy it or to stream it, etc., but instead are going to the illegal method. But again, in spite of that, by the time you count record sales, iTunes downloads, legitimate streaming services, subscription radio, all of that, record sales are up. And that is a good thing. And I am a huge fan of that. Just, again, the part of me that's really amazed is that because of all the illegitimate ways to consume content, particularly music, because people just don't think twice before. Like, people actually feel more guilty for some reason about downloading illegally an episode of The Simpsons versus downloading illegally their favorite song by a new band.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know why. They're just like, oh, well, the TV show, they actually put work in it. It's like, music is a thing too, people. Come on.
There's an entitlement attitude when it comes to music.
Yeah, I know, and I hate it. I honestly hate it.
On the one hand, I do think that access to the arts in some sense, I don't know necessarily that I want to say it's a human right, but I do think that access to the arts is a very important for everyone. Even it's not a necessity of life in the sense that food and water are, but I do think it is a necessity for the soul, if you will.
Right. Well,
in the soul, but for even for the mind, you could say, or the rational and beauty seeking parts of us.
Right. Well, and that's all perfectly good and well, and I totally agree, but I mean, I feel the need to see Star Wars. I pay to see Star Wars.
Well, and also, I mean, what I was gonna say is there's a reason we have things like libraries.
Oh yeah.
And there are legitimate ways to access music free of charge, through what I always will tell people is they say, well, I feel like I should be able to listen. Why
Radio.
Why should I be deprived of the arts because of our capitalistic system? And I say, well, go to your local library. That's the venue where, I mean, that our society has, and I think it's a very good thing. That we're anyone, any resident of your city with a valid library card, which is free, can walk in there and check out anything they want.
Yeah, and people, but again, with the entitlement attitude, and again, I read an article, this was years ago, that, a guy said, I mean, this was in relation to going to the theaters and all that, but, and just to, I'm going to go ahead and quote that article. He said, why would I go to a stinky theater with popcorn on the floor and soda in the seat and pay, $10 for a ticket, $10 for concessions, and have to fight lines, have to fight traffic, all of that, just to sit down and watch it with people that might talk during the movie, that might cough, all that, ruin my movie experience, when I can just do it at home for free with all these tools that allow me to do it for free, illegitimately. And I don't think he has a valid point, but I think he has the mindset. And this is a guy that actually posted an article for a reputable news journal that I'm not going to mention. I don't want to get in trouble from anyone, but it made me very astonished to see that. But anyway, so you take that mentality, you translate it to the arts. You have these people that are like, oh, well, I've just been using AC/DC today, so I'm going to continue to use them. I feel entitled to listen to AC/DC because they are my all-time favorite band ever. And the radio doesn't play them anymore. I could go to the library and listen to like their top 10 hits and all that, but you know what? The library's across town. I gotta drive for 10 minutes there. I gotta park. I gotta deal with the smelly hobos outside. I gotta deal with the library clerk with the crooked eye that looks at me funny. I mean, people will sit there and compile all that and just come to the conclusion of, or I can just download it from this you download free website, and no one does any harm. But it does a lot of harm, and they just don't realize that. I don't know. It's just it that mindset really just it irks me. It really does. I mean, the entitlement attitude towards arts. I mean, yes, I everybody should have access to arts, but we've given you access to the arts. It's not my fault that you don't want to go through the steps necessary to listen to those. So I don't know. It's just it bugs me significantly, as you can tell.
I know, but yeah, anyway, I mean, well, I don't actually remember what we were talking about. Oh yes, recorded music.
Yeah, the recorded music. Yeah.
My caveat on that as well is that we have to remember just because revenue from recorded music is up doesn't mean that artists are getting more money from their music.
Right. However, for me it shows paper and ink demand for the arts, for music.
It shows the industry is doing better, and it shows that people will actually pay for music or to stream
Right.
it, the CD. So that is encouraging. I mean,
And that's the part that I'm taking from this is there is demand. It is on paper at least rising demand. And it's up to us as artists, whether I'm, a solo pianist just playing in piano bars, or I'm a rock band trying to make it big, or I'm me, a composer trying to just scrape through. I mean, there's a demand. You just have to find your demand. Because, I mean, your demand isn't everywhere. I mean, my music doesn't perform as well in some age group demographics as it does in others. AC/DC, I'm sure, has, whenever they were on tour, I'm sure that they had some cities that was like, we're not going to go there. Why? Because we never make any money there. I mean, it sucks, but it's true. You just got to find your demographic, and once you do, you gotta nail it home. But yeah, anyway, so recorded music industry up despite all these issues with illegal downloads of music and all that, and that gives me great hope, because hopefully this will show that there is demand and that this is an area that needs to be looked at by legislators. So do you want to take this next bit, Jacob?
Yes. This is just a quick item here on another inspiring story that perhaps we will deconstruct. I don't know. I think this is a good thing. The New Yorker just published an article about I guess it's called a homeless orchestra. There's a violinist in Los Angeles. His name is looking it up here. Vijay Gupta, a violinist for the LA Philharmonic, who founded this organization called Street Symphony about 6 or 7 years ago. That is bringing the homeless people who live in Los Angeles together and to make music. And I recommend giving the article a look. It's at the New Yorker. The actual title, we can post the URL in the description later. But the title of the article is Handel's Messiah on Skid Row. And it focuses on this performance of the Messiah that this organization did. and has some quotes from some of the people involved in this production who've talked about how it's an empowering experience to be able to participate in something like this. So this is, I mean, not really a whole lot to talk about here, but I do think that this is something that shows ways in which we as not just composers, but composers and musicians of any kind can reach out to our community and use our skills to help people in a way that, I mean, it doesn't just, it's not just, a handout. It really helps to empower people and give them, I guess you could say, something to live for, a skill that they can say, I've achieved. Which I think is important for people who have been disempowered in our society. It's not necessarily just economic status that is contributes to the lack of dignity there. It's all the lack of we were talking earlier about access to the arts, lack of
Right.
access to these other elements of what makes us human. So I think this is a really good thing. It kind of made me think about maybe things I can do in my community to help those who are less privileged than myself. So yeah, I recommend giving the article a read.
Yeah, and I've scrolled through it on screen slowly for you guys just now, so or I did it over there rather, on top of Jacob's beautiful face. So yeah, go ahead and you can go back, you can pause the video, you can read it there, or we'll post the video in the description for you to read there. But yeah, that's actually really cool and much better than the community music thing that we covered a couple months ago about flutes in Southern California.
Oh.
So, anytime I can bring that up, it's wonderful. All right. So.
We had David. We also had the David Lang Symphony for a Broken Orchestra.
Right. Yeah.
Other good things that happening in our
a different. Well, actually, this is kind of for a broken orchestra too.
No.
I don't know. I thought it was funnier than it actually is. Bad person.
I don't know, man.
Bad person. Whatever. I've made peace with it.
But it's kind of made me think of I mean I'm here in St. Louis at the moment, but we both live in Norman, and it's kind of made me think of well, I don't know that starting an organization is necessarily my calling while I'm sitting working on my master's, but I mean things I can do or things that I can bring people together to do to help other people in our community. So I just think it's a good thought-provoking article.
Yeah.
So
thing. So yeah, that's it for our news segment. Now we want to talk a little bit today about just kind of the breadth versus depth, and which one's more important for your listening or just score study habits in general.
There was an oh, sorry, I think I interrupted you.
No, you're fine. I was waiting for you.
There was an article at the Walrus. I think it came out last week.
Really, the Walrus.
Well, I'm not really familiar with. I know the name of the site. It's the Walrus. I think it's a Canadian website.
It's silly.
But it is one of these news and thinking websites that publishes articles, and it relates. The article was about the field of English and literature, but I think a lot of the principles apply. And it's called The Case Against Reading Everything, and if you read this article, it basically talks about it's talking about writers. And how conventional wisdom in the field of writing tends to be read as widely as possible. Read widely is kind of this phrase that keeps coming back. Read across many different authors, many different genres, many different styles of writing, and I guess time frames, old books, new books, everything. And the guy who wrote this article, name Jason Guriel is the name of the writer, basically argued against this and said, well, no, what really makes you a good writer is really digging deep into one poem, one book or one author. It's getting. He talks about, I guess, the benefits of obsession when you just go on it like this binge of Tolkien or T.S. Eliot or what have you. There's a quote in here, again relating to literature, but I think applying to music as well. It says, Seamus Heaney, who's a famous poet, has noticed that the person has a single poem in his head, one that he returns to and through which, even in small ways, he understands his life better. This constitutes a devotion to the art. It is enough. And he warns against. This author also warns against that he thinks reading widely is, in some sense, quote, a failure to make judgments, unquote. Talking about how if you just try to gobble up everything, you're going to end up reading a lot of mediocre things that maybe aren't worth your time. So I don't know, Zach. What do you think about this issue? Because I kind of have my own thoughts, and I think there's something to what this guy says, although I don't agree with him completely.
Well, my opinion on it is, I mean, I'm kind of a mixed bag. I think that in relation to music, it's important to know and be aware of all the different trends, the major composers, the major works. However, I mean, how much more am I going to get out of listening to Beethoven 2? Versus if I were to go more in depth on, let's say, I don't know, the Firebird Suite by Stravinsky for the time. And then at the same point, there's a lot of Renaissance music that some people found very enlightening for them, but for me, Renaissance music in general just doesn't cut it. So I'm probably not going to expand my breadth over to that as much. So, and this is also tricky for me right now because in general, I guess I'm more of a depth person. I try to go in depth as much as I can on a particular thing. Like, I'll sit there and I'll give, like, for instance, we have listening, kind of, I guess, listening, all of them, as part of the graduate forum here. And I will, whenever it's a new piece I haven't listened to, which, like, a 1 in 3 chance that's a new piece I haven't listened to, I'll listen to it once as, like, a dedicated listening. And then after that, I will just have it on in the background. Or, sorry, no, I flipped it a little bit. I always listen to a piece once as background music, kind of so I can get vaguely aware of it. Then I sit there in depth, listen to it on my second time through, so that my brain is mentally prepared for, okay, let me see what leads to this moment that I'm excited about. And then after that, I will listen to it a couple more subsequent times after that, maybe 2, 3 tops extra, as not really background noise, but just as, like, maybe I'm doing another thing at the same time. Like, maybe I'm cleaning the office, cooking dinner, maybe I'm playing a video game, whatever. And for me, that gets me a lot of depth into a piece. Now, some people I know, like, they will listen to something. Obviously, they'll do the in-depth thing, but they'll try to condense it, I guess, to where they will not get as in-depth with a piece. They'll get the gist of it and just say, oh, well, I have to listen to this other piece because this is another piece on the 2,000 piece long list that I need to listen to. And I think that that's a mistake because you're not allowed to latch into anything. I mean, like, there's a couple things, honestly, with the listening journals that I've listened to only once, and I'm not regretting it because it was a complete bore. Like, it was just horrible for me. And I feel at that point, I think that's where breadth, I guess, comes to play. I don't know, but I guess if I were to say one way or the other, I am probably more depth than breadth. With all that said, I think it's more important to pick a select few, go really down deep, and really burrow in while having a surface level breadth.
I do think it's important. I mean, kind of spinning off what you're saying, there's a balance to be had there. I mean, sometimes you may hear a piece that is completely bores you on the first listening, but if you listen to it again and again and again, you find that you get more out of it every time. So I do think it's important to keep an open mind, even with stuff that you might be tempted to reject out of hand. However, I do think there's something to be said with, like you're talking about the listening when we do these assignments and listening journals. Yeah, I do think, you might think, oh, I have to put the same amount of work into everything. Well, I mean, no, you really don't. I mean, I do think it's good, as this writer is talking about, to follow your obsessions, and to follow those rabbit holes that really grip you. Um, as I said, think there's a balance there, and uh, ultimately, I mean, I think you're kind of right. I mean, breadth. When we talk about breadth versus depth, I mean, breadth is going to be an inherently kind of surface level thing. Um, so
Actually, I have a really good I have a really good analogy for this if you don't mind.
yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
There's a common thing. There's a game type that most people are familiar with, an MMO, massive multiplayer online.
Yeah.
And in these, there's often achievements.
Hmm.
And these achievements are basically just, oh, you did something weird, or you did something cool, or you did something impressive.
Hmm.
Somewhere in those lines. Or like you found something rare. Things like that. And in one of these games in particular, World of Warcraft, there is a huge debate of, hey, there's too many achievements. I can't possibly complete all of them. Okay. Now, obviously, if you were to complete all these achievements, that shows that you have great breadth of a game. But what some people have pointed out in forums, and this is something that I was reading a bit over my break while I was at my parents' house, is if you're that worried about breadth, then why are you playing that game? You know, you're not going in depth at all. You you
Right.
aren't actually enjoying yourself. You're spending so much time focusing on, I have to touch all these different poles. I have to do everything, instead of just sitting there and saying, you know what? This is the aspect that I love, that I am going to go die hard on, and that I am going to love more than anything else. And then maybe that will be the achievement tab that is completely decked out. There's no gaps left unturned. Everything's been done. And I think that in music, we we need to think about that, because I mean, yeah, it'd be quite a quest to sit there and listen to all of the works by a composer of, I'll just say, note, by any composer of note. I mean, yeah, that'd take you a couple years of relatively solid listening, but would you actually gain much out of that? Would be the question.
As
My
Go ahead.
thesis would be that no, you wouldn't really get much
Mhm.
benefit from that. I mean, yeah, you'd have a good general understanding of the history of music, like, oh yeah, this leads to that, this leads to that, cool, but
Mhm.
I mean, you can't really latch into anything because you're so focused on, okay, now I can't even process the Firebird because now I need to listen to Petrushka, and it's a mess.
And I think, if you read this article, which I don't know if you had time to read since you were traveling
I
before
did
this.
not, unfortunately. I was
That's
traveling.
fine. But the author tends to make the point that if you look at, he's talking about literature, but if you look at the really great writers, they all, you can kind of tell what their obsessions are. Like, I mean, if you read Tolkien, The Lord of the Rings, and you really dig in, and you really dig into to Tolkien, and what made him tick, and what makes the book tick, you can tell that, I mean, Tolkien was a very well-rounded and well-read guy, but he had these particular obsessions that he really explored in, well, mythology, particularly Norse mythology, um, and theology, and all these elements that really permeate his book in ways that they wouldn't have been able to if he didn't have this in-depth knowledge of those subjects. Um, and I think that the same thing is true for composers too. Here's how I tend to think about it. The the author of this article kind of is saying, read widely, or as we might say, listen widely, is about something that's not something we should for. But I disagree with that. I do think it's important to have in-depth knowledge of a few things, as well as a general knowledge of our discipline, in a broad sense. But here's what I would say: I think you can do both. And to
Yeah.
me, if you find that you can't do both, which I think many of us do struggle with, if you find that you can't do both, maybe you're just not listening enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. because I think a lot of composers uh, tend sometimes struggle with listening enough. We get so caught up in having to in the rat race of having to do our own stuff that we sometimes forget to stop and listen. And here's something I might recommend to our listeners. Try if you just set it a goal and tell yourself I'm going to listen to at least two works every day, and one will be something I've heard before, um, and one will be something that I have never heard before. And of course, just two works a day might not seem like a lot, but once you get into that habit and once you train yourself to listen more, yeah, I think you probably find yourself listening to more than two works a day.
Right.
And I think if you stick to that, and I mean, and I'm kind of including listening and score studying here, in the same boat, because I mean, reading a score is listening. It's just in your head. Um, so I think if you commit yourself to that, um, you end up getting the breadth of here's something I never heard before. I want to explore that, but also the depth of listening to particular pieces over and over again and falling in love with them and learning something new from them every time. Um, so that's kind of how I think. That's kind of the practical way I think of doing this.
Well,
Um,
me, yeah, I guess that does strike kind of a balance between the two. However, I think, put it this way, regimenting yourself to make it strict like that, like, okay, one new, one old, one new, one old, one new, one old, that can cause a little bit of a problem down the line, because at what point does something become old? Because maybe you were listening to a Beethoven symphony and you just don't remember having listened to it
right.
whenever you see it
You
come
don't
up.
remember.
So at that point, is it new? Is it old? I mean, how do you
Right.
classify
You
this?
think this? I don't necessarily envision something like this as a strict rule to be abided by. With certain subheadings that you have to follow. I mean, I think if you've heard a piece before and you legitimately don't remember it, it's probably in the spirit of the thing to treat it as something you've never heard before. But I don't really think of this as something if you're a composer and you find yourself struggling to listen enough, and you start doing kind of setting yourself this discipline. I don't see it as something that you necessarily to one old and one new work every day. I think for a discipline like this is something you use um, to train yourself to listen in a certain way and to ultimately order your time in a certain way, so that hopefully eventually you don't have to think about listening to one thing I've heard before and one thing I haven't every day. You just are in the habit of listening. You're in the habit of listening, and you've learned to love uh, you've learned to love pieces that you listen to over and over again, and you've learned to love discovering new music. That's how I think of it. Not a permanent
Okay,
discipline.
yeah. I mean, honestly, a system like that with the kind of loose, I think that works exceptionally well. Uh, I mean, I think was doing that for. If I had known I was doing it for a while, because basically the way I did it was I listened to a new piece of contemporary music every day, and every week I in depth studied one major piece of repertoire.
Right.
Beethoven Symphony, a Mozart Quartet, something like that, where I could just get nitty gritty, and I would sit there and I'd do anything from Roman numeral analysis to analysis, all that, and that's something I did a lot during my undergraduate, and I stopped doing about halfway through my master's. However, it's kind of twofold the reason why I stopped. It's not because I found it boring or any of that, but it's just because I find myself balancing it differently. Where now it's just I will find something new and I will go all in on it if it suits me. Or it'll be something new. I'll listen to just a few minutes of it. And I mean, I'm at the point now, I've got so many years under my belt of sitting there listening to this music that I'm able to pretty quickly come to the conclusion of this piece maybe not worth my time. This needs to be at the bottom of my priorities. And
Mhm.
that's something that, I mean, it's kind of a side effect of going through graduate school. By the end of your masters, like I mean, note this date that I'm predicting this. By the end of your masters, you'll reach that point, or at least close to that point of, you know what? I know I'm not gonna like this. Basically, just based on where I know the composer came from and how the piece began. Because those two things are always very telling. I mean, obviously there are some pieces that can completely flip that, but it's an interesting thing because think about it this way: how many of these new pieces of yours have you sat there afterwards and thought, "Well, dang, that was a waste of time. I wish I could have that 20 minutes back."
Not many actually, and I kind of the way I think about it is I do I mean yeah you develop at some point an ability to kind of tell is this worth my time, is this worth my time or not. My practice generally speaking is I like to listen to the whole piece. Um, I mean,
I'm not saying anything against
sometimes
that.
I
Yeah.
can't, but to me, just listening to the first few minutes, I mean, yeah, you sometimes you can kind of tell, but sometimes pieces surprise you also, and if you get so caught up in your own personal tastes and solidify it by tending to reject things out of hand, I think there's the danger that your taste doesn't expand as much or develop as much as it could.
Well,
Um,
right, and again, that's why it's important to keep trying. But there does come a point where you do realize, oh, this is a piece with service bell, and I've heard 30 of these. I know how these all go. I
I
can't
tend
waste my time with this.
I tend to the way I tend to do it is I will usually listen to the whole piece. Occasionally I run across something that I just can't stand, I have to turn it off. But I will usually listen to the whole piece, and at that
We've
point
all had those pieces where it's like 20 seconds in, you're like, oh dear lord.
yeah, and once I've heard the piece, at some point you have to make the judgment call. Is this worth my time or is it not? And you can never, of course, you can never be certain. If a piece you don't think is very good may have some hidden depths that you didn't detect on first listening. But ultimately, I mean, what you're doing is you're making a probability judgment. In whether you listen to the first 5 minutes or whether you listen to the whole piece, you're making a probability judgment of is it worth my time to explore this further. And
Right.
to me, I like to have all the information, at least all the data about that piece that I can glean on a first listening
That you can
before
stand at
making
least.
a probability judgment. Not necessarily because I can't to the first 5 minutes and make a judgment as just because I think it's important, to show enough to the composer of this to give my attention and my time. And I don't often regret sitting down and listening to something. I mean, not everything I something I'm like, oh yeah, I got to listen to more of this composer or I got to study this in depth. But I very rarely regret listening to something all the way through. Um, and when it does happen and I regret it, it's like, well, sometimes you have to
Jake,
accept the dud.
Jacob, you are
Yes.
going very robot. I'm only catching like every third syllable. Um, yeah, you're someone's probably downloading. Um, yeah. So basically, for those that didn't, basically, in the interest of you guys being able to hear it, why don't we pick up this discussion next week? Because we've been at it for about an hour. Jeez.
Okay.
But yeah, we'll continue this next week because this is an interesting topic. Breadth, depth. I mean, I think we've gone through the majority of it, but I think maybe me and Jacob we should sit here. We should come up with our own conclusions because I mean,
Mhm.
I I mean it's an interesting topic. I mean, it's not a black and white. There's a lot of gray. But yeah, we'll definitely continue this talk next week. So expect more next week on this, and expect Jacob to not sound like a robot like he does. Maybe he'll probably not sound like a robot. All right, but thank you very much for tuning in to Composer Talk. This was week 10 with Zach Daniels and Jacob Frost. Thanks for watching, and see ya.
Adios. Am I still